Greetings, people of the Earth dimension and plane. It's me. And look who's here today. Speaking of aliens, this look like a little alien. This is the cat from space right here. He's my little cat from space. You little crazy cat. How is everybody? Rise and shine. Rise and shine. It's humpity hump day. Isn't that right, Peaches? Peaches, every day is Saturday for you. You were like that Morrissey song. Or is that Sunday? Yeah, you have your own song every day, Saturday. So, hey, what's going on? We opened a can of worms over on Twitter with that poll. And let me show you guys the results of the poll since we ran it. The poll is closed and it is official. It is definitely official here. There it is right there. 91. I got 204 votes. I think 1,100 people, 1,900, almost 2,000 people. It's really interesting. It feels like even in Fredericksburg, when they have elections, only about 10% of the population vote. And this is almost right in alignment with that 10% sort of ratio, right? But 91.7% said yes, that astrologers need to have their credibility reassessed. And then 8.3% said no. So, and I tried to stay out of this. I wanted it to be neutral. I didn't want to add, my point of view with the whole thing because I didn't want to influence other people's votes. So if a person made a comment, I commented after the poll was over. By the way, that's a sunrise. That is a sunrise. Do you know where you would be if you were to watch that sunrise, witness that sunrise? You'd be in San Diego. That's a San Diego sunrise. Anyway, I'm just wondering, I think I kind of understand on some level how people that would be in the 8.9% category, I think I understand where they're coming from, right? I think they're coming from a place of, well, maybe some people get some things wrong every now and then, but their astrology is good. And I think that was something that big. And remember, my phrasing of the question was advocating getting the shot, not saying, well, do what you think is best for your body, right? No, these were people that were adamant, vehement about being vaccinated and using astrology to justify the vaccination process. And I think while I am generally forgiving for most humans, and I'm working on the ones that I'm not forgiving for, work in progress. But my feeling that this is an unpardonable sin because there are people who advocated this and using something like astrology to push an agenda or push a belief which would have absolutely devastating circumstances on the life of an individual. And so in that regard, I believe that it is an unpardonable sin because you have interfered with something. Now, you could say, well, you were advocating to not get it. That's true. That's true. But I was uh, on it like a hound dog from the beginning. And I realized, well, first of all, you got to go back in time, right? You have to go back in time. And we're going to get to the weather, I promise. I won't make this long. But you got to go back in time and you got to look at the eclipse that took place. This was in September of 2019. And that eclipse took place in where? It took place in China, basically going across Hong Kong and Wuhan. And myself and Heather Eland were doing shows at that time. And we were talking about this eclipse. And I said, look, something big is going down in China with this eclipse. And I thought at the time that it was related to the protests. And yes, it was related to the protests, but it was like that was the storm that was brewing back in September of 2019. So we were paying attention to this eclipse going over China, and it never left my brain, right? It never left my brain. And then as we moved forward and these things started to happen, and I knew that the Saturn Pluto conjunction was coming in January of 2020. And for me, that was it, man. That was the nexus point. That was the moment. And I don't necessarily fear a lot of astrological alignments, but that one got my respect in a big way, really big way. And I knew something was coming, and I knew it was something we're going to have to deal with, and was not going to be good by any stretch. And so when it all started to unfold, and I remember hearing about the first cases of this in China, right? I'm like, normally when you hear something, you kind of go, okay, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. This is kind of my general modus operandi. When I heard about that, I was like, oh, we are so fucked now, right? Whatever this is, whether it's real, whatever it is, we are so fucked now, because I knew that was the thing, right? And then when you go back in time, and this is exactly what I was doing in real time with all of this, right? The Chinese had passed in August of 2019 a mandatory vaccination law that everybody had to be vaccinated. And so September rolls around, and that's what happens. And it's almost congruent with that eclipse. And what happens to those vaccinated people? Like, we don't know. They all say that, well, this was part of, the wet market in Wuhan and the labs. And sure, that might be the case, right? But we don't know what was in those jabs of those people, right? And what did the Chinese know anyway? And so when I saw that happen, and they passed that mandatory vaccination law, then they get vaccinated, right? And then they have the paramilitary games, where the fuck that thing was. I'm like, okay, this is a problem. This is a problem. And then they announce it, and I'm like, it's only a matter of time, and we're gonna have to deal with this. And I was at the Austin Astrological Society. It was like a talk, and it was about the Saturn Pluto conjunction. And I got up there. I think I was the second astrologer, and I wrote on the blackboard the word time, and I circled it, right. And I started to talk about time, and then I said there is going to be a time very soon where time will stop. It will stop, and wherever you are, that's where you're going to be. That was lockdown, right? And time did stop. It stopped on 3/11/2020. And so I talked about this moment with the Saturn Pluto conjunction, and how important it was, and how it was going to change our lives from that point forward. And all this is with the virus and now we don't really get to virus territory news-wise until February. And that's when the first case of quote unquote COVID shows up in where? It shows up in an assisted living facility in Washington State, right? And like when I heard that, I'm like, okay, we're in big trouble now. And then it was all just about amassing the evidence and putting things together. But if you go back and look at the astrology of it all, right, you could see where all these things were being put into play. And then it was like, okay, well, what do you do with the information moving forward? You got all these people, dropping like flies, right? And I remember seeing this one video, this guy who dropped like a fly, and then he got up and looked around to see if anybody was looking at him, saying, some of this is fucking fake, right? Some of this is fake. Some of these people who are dropping, this is bullshit. And that's when I became very concerned. And then, then when they started to talk about, doing this jab, which was, you just knew it was coming, right? You could just see it like a train in the distance. And it's like, you do not want to put this in your body. I'm sorry. These are the same people that have created all of these other wonderful drugs that have created so many serious side effects in our lives. And you're going to trust these people. You're going to trust Bill Gates. And all of a sudden they roll out this little troll of a fucking man in Tony Fauci. And then if you did 20 minutes worth of research with Tony Fauci, you would know that he was an absolute huckster and was, at ground zero during the whole AIDS thing. And then all you had to do is spend about 20 minutes listening to Carrie Mullis basically rip him to shreds, right? And you put all this stuff together and it's like, no, dude, and then there were the social effects. I'm not even talking about the shot. Then there were the social effects, which is the Saturn Pluto conjunction. And that's when governments, right? When governments and corporations were part of the ultimate fusion and merger of power in the corporate state, and basically telling you what you could do or not do and where to go and not to go and what. I mean, that was it, man. They were doing a massive power grab at that time. And it's like, okay, are you just going to succumb to their massive power grab? And that's the astrology. And how could you not pay attention to that with the Saturn Pluto conjunction and say, oh, they're our friends? They've never been our friends, ever. So, and it's really funny because I started to think about this last week, and it's because of one astrologer who will remain nameless, who has a very large following, who pushed this aggressively. And I thought to myself, that person, their credibility needs to be readdressed. Like, it's one thing to say, check with your doctor, right? Of course, your doctor's like, I think you really should get that, right? It's one thing to say that, but to have a platform and to aggressively use that platform to advocate for something that had such deleterious, like you wouldn't even know. This thing has never been really tested. How could you be so sure that it would be for the betterment of you and everybody else around you, right? It was all just one big fucking virtue signal. That's all it was. So I thought about it and I threw it out there on Monday, and lo and behold, there's Fauci. There's Fauci in front of Congress on Monday. So it's an interesting kind of sync, right? And I like, in the back of my mind, that I know that he was going to come to Washington. Yeah, probably. I didn't know when. I didn't know what it was going to look like. But this thing had been in my brain for about a week. And I thought, okay, let me just throw this out there. So now David has taken the poll and then he's reposted it, right? And I think now that this may be maybe a little viral, like William Stick Evers has reposted it. And I really do feel like it's not just astrologers, okay? It's also mediums, it's healers, it's all these people that are in the metaphysical world, the art and science of metaphysics, who were the advocate of this thing. They all need to be reassessed and reevaluated. I'm sorry, because they have impinged upon people's lives in ways that will never ever be able to return. There's a comment on the comments from yesterday's show where somebody goes into great detail about what's happened to their relatives as a result of this, right? And you had outside of this world, you had enough hills in plants that were pushing the solution, right? Anyway, it was just it's an interesting thing that's kind of going viral now. And when you look at the astrology, I'll bring it back to astrology. When you look at, the astrology of like what we're talking about, that's Pluto in Aquarius retrograde, right? We're looking back. Astrology, Uranus, Aquarius rules astrology, and it's Pluto, and we're going back and we're kind of digging through the bones of the past. This is I think, an important kind of reevaluation process for all of us, right? For all of us. And it's not just astrology. When you get into Aquarius, you get into the media. So it's not just people that are sitting down and looking at a chart or whatever, right? So we're I think we're having this moment, this collective moment where enough time has elapsed, right? Where we can safely have some reasonable distance and perspective and say some people were out of line and they were out of their field of expertise, right? And again, if you want to be an astrologer, and it's what I do for a living, right? But man, I was working every single angle with this, and I was adamant, I'm not going there, and I'm not even wearing a fucking mask. That's the other part of this, right? The muzzling of people. It wasn't just, hey, you got to go get. No, it was the muzzling, and it was the lockdowns, and it was the inability to let people come into a business to get what they need. It was such bullshit, such bullshit. And it's a good thing I had. It's a good thing, right? Like Mars was in Aries during that time because I was fucking fired up. Let's go, right? But I think we're all having this moment now, and Fauci in Washington was a big part of that moment. We're seeing it now, and this is a dangerous time because when we get to this point, and there's enough evidence out there, right, and enough people that are basically saying this motherfucker needs to hang, right, or X, Y, and Z. That's when they just roll out the next thing. Get ready for the next thing, right? Bird flu, more race riots, trans riots, power outages, whatever, right? Because just when humanity gets onto their game, when we get onto their game, they change the game, and they have no problem resetting the entire board because they've done it before. They've done it before. We've been here before, but this is a different time because we have this medium at our disposal. We have the ability to exchange information in a way that is completely omnidimensional. And I'm not sure they had this. Did they have it in Atlantis? I don't know. Maybe they did, but maybe they were so blissed out or whatever that it didn't really matter. Who knows? Right. But that's what they'll do. They will, you ever play somebody chess or some board game and you're whooping their ass, and then all of a sudden they'll just go like this with the board and all the pieces go flying everywhere. That's what they do. That's what they do. They're the spoiled little child who says, well, if I can't win this fucking game, then you're not going to win either. How's that for an intro? All right, Chataria, I'm running behind. I'm just going to collectively acknowledge all of you this morning. And thank you for being here. Let's get into the weather. All right. You know what song I have in my head this morning? I have oh, that's yesterday. That's not gonna work. I have American Girl by Tom Petty in my brain. I don't know why. I just woke up with that song in my head. It's not a bad song though. She was an American girl. Oh, that is today is the 5th, isn't it? That is right. I was right. I was right. All right, let's make this a little bigger. And for all of you who, under all that immense pressure, stood your ground, I salute you. I salute you for your courage, your bravery, even risking being vilified and rejected by your family and friends. You passed a major test. And you may not know it at this point in time, but you passed a major test that set you apart from other people. And there are people who got it, and I love them. And you know what? I'll support them. I'll read their charts. I won't think anything less of them. My own mother got it, right? And I got over it, and I had to, bring her back into my heart. That's what we do. So I'm not saying that they're lesser people, but you deserve some accolades and praise for standing in the eye, standing with your face in the storm, right? You were Bob Seger against the wind. That's what you were. All right, here's the chart. Let's see. We're really tracking Mars. That's what we're tracking right now. So there it is. It's at the final degrees of Aries. Now remember, the 27th and the 28th degree of a sign, it goes wonky, right? I don't know if you've been clocking violence over the last 48 hours. Not good. Not good. There was a story of a woman and her husband walking the streets of Chicago, and they weren't in a bad part of town. I can tell you that. And they were out for dinner, and they were surrounded by a group of young thugs. And they said, "These are our streets. This is our town." They maced him. They beat him up. She got kicked in the stomach, and she was pregnant, and she lost the baby. Although the baby was quite young, nonetheless, she lost the baby. There's the reports of violence over the last 48 hours have been, if you're paying attention to these things, the violence volume has been turned up. And this is going to continue to be a theme moving forward for the next 3 weeks. So 2 weeks. So until Mars gets to about 12 degrees Taurus, it's going to be in this square with Pluto. Now, that square will diminish, and it may not have as much juice at the beginning, but just prepare. The next 2 weeks are going to be turgid and violent. And it's not just in the United States. It is something we are going to see all around the world. We have 2 war fronts. A third might be opening up in the Pacific, right? And remember, the people are waking up. People are seeing what's going on. When Anthony Fauci, I don't even call him Doc, when Tony Fauci gets absolutely pummeled by Marjorie Taylor Greene in front of everybody, that is not a good sign. I mean, it's good for us, yeah. And you say, well, it's just bread and circus, and not really. Not really, right? Because Pluto is going to retrograde back into Capricorn for one last time. And this is when people are finally going to see like the corruption, the malfeasance, everything that they've had to put up with this system that is so infested with parasites and maggots, because it is. You're not. You're not. The system is. And we're going to see it, right? It's going to come back into Capricorn. And man, it's going to be unmistakable. Unmistakable. And that's when, again, these other things start to happen. They start to run out all the distractions. They start to run out all these programs, right? Here's the key. Here's the key. Do not get distracted, right? Don't go running off in all these directions. And it's going to be easy to do that. It'll be easy to do that because there's going to be so much going on. Bringing it back to violence is watching this WNBA shit, right? You know, and they're beating the hell out of Caitlin Clark. And I'm not here to carry water for Caitlin Clark, whatever. She got a $20 million contract with Nike. She can afford to take a few elbows to the side. I'm not advocating it, right? But that's the level of discourse around violence that we're seeing right now. And it's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. And when Mars moves into Taurus, the effects of it are in some cases quite irreversible because we're dealing with a fixed angle. So over the course of the next 3 days, when we go through these final degrees of Mars and Aries, 27, 28, especially at 28, when everything gets very wobbly with that sign, right? Gets real wobbly, that's when things are very hard to control. Now, in terms of your own life, and I have to pay attention to this, in terms of your own life, you have to watch your temper. You have to watch your temper. If you feel like there's an undercurrent of aggression or frustration in your life, go work out. Work out. Get on top of it. Because it's almost viral, right? The anger will almost be viral. It'll almost be like a plague unto itself. So just work it through. Work it through, work it out so that you're not being part of the problem. Because the anger quotient is going to be very high. And whether it's supply chain or water or food, whatever, right? People are going to be steamed. And it's going to, this 2-week period that we're basically talking about here is going to be rough. Now, on the other side of it, once Mars clicks in at about 12, it'll start to sextile with Saturn. So we'll have a bit more stability, right? The grown-ups will prevail. Cooler heads will prevail, right? You can have a moment during that time where it's like, okay, I stepped out of the ring for a while. I'm stepping back into the ring now. Because that's when you can assert your personal authority. Not this square. If you want to tackle things, right? If there are challenges in your own life that you want to tackle with this Mars-Pluto square, there you go. Go for it. You want to clean up your house, clean up your yard, clean up your life, right? There is a vigorous amount of energy that's available. It's better than, getting into a road rage situation, have your head blown off. So just we're kind of entering into this tunnel now. It's not even a tunnel. And I hate to use the word vortex, which is overused. But we're entering into what I would call a cyclonic period that will be punctuated by violence. And I think even some of the gun stuff will probably come up, right? Because we have Chiron at 22. The U.S. is already going through its Chiron return. It'll probably retrograde and go back to 20 at some point during the cycle. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure of that. Meanwhile, we're chatting our lives away here with all the Gemini. We have the moon in Gemini, and it is balsamic. It's an interesting balsamic moon because it's mutable. It's like, oh, I got to let that go. Okay. No problem. So I would say if you're looking to make a lifestyle change, if you're looking to, eliminate something from your diet that you don't think is good for you, this balsamic moon in Gemini is easy. It's like, okay, I'll let that go. Go find an alternative, right? If you are, somebody that craves sweets, go find stevia, or go find monk fruit, or go find erythritol, or whatever, right? Whatever. This is one of those balsamic moons where it's easy to let go. Now, the other side of this is that if you are letting go, because it's mutable, there can be a very kind of cavalier effect. And if it gets into the realm of human relations and emotions, people don't always appreciate a cavalier effect, right? You kind of have to go through the process and say, hey, look, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. This just doesn't, this isn't working. And, whatever that isn't working could be your job. Sometimes the cavalier effect with leaving your job can be a good thing. The other thing too that I wanted to talk about is the ripple effect of the closing of these restaurants. And a lot of it is starting in California. Like California, because of their minimum wage law, has created it's a seismic event. And as a result, a lot of restaurants are having to shutter their doors because they can't compete. Right? They can't have somebody who's making $20 an hour based on their cost ratio, right? And there are a lot of people who will say, well, the CEOs just need to take less. All right, let's just talk about that for a second. Let's say you're the CEO for Taco Cabana, which is closing in California. How much do you really make per year? I don't know how much they make per year. I'll take a guess. Maybe the CEO of Taco Cabana makes $20 million a year. I'll be generous. $20 million a year. Well, let's say that CEO said, I'll take 10. I'll take a haircut and have 10. And we'll spread $10 million around to the rest of all the employees. How far do you think that $10 million would go? Seriously. How far do you think it would go? Do you think $10 million amongst all the employees in a chain that has 40 restaurants, I believe that's the number. And that's not including the cooks, the servers, all the other, parts of the business, the people that work in distribution and the warehouses and all the stuff that's associated with running a vast chain of businesses, right? Or chain of businesses in that regard. I can tell you right now that $10 million would not go very far. It wouldn't. For a CEO to say, yeah, I can take a haircut. You would have to be in like Jamie Dimon territory. You'd have to say, yeah, I could lop off about 150 mil a year from what I'm making. That might make a difference, right? It might make a difference, but the cost and the cost and product and salary ratio is skewed. It's off the charts. And so now we're seeing this seismic effect in all these restaurants that are closing. And you can say, well, good. They have seed oils and all this other. Okay, well, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But what are you going to do with all those people that are now out of work? Where are they going to go? Is Mark Cuban going to step up and start to create new restaurants for these people to work at without seed oils? And look, I'm going on a bit of a rant here. I'm sorry. But we're in a very volatile phase. Right. And a lot of this is right here with all the mutability. So if this is the one thing I will say about that situation with the moon in Gemini, and it's all about security, right? The moon is all about security. It doesn't matter what sign it's in. It's about security. There is the ability to be much more agile and nimble when you let go of something. That's the one good thing that I think is a part of this. Also, we have this Moon-Mercury conjunction, which means that you should not waste a lot of time processing information. If you have information, enough information, and it checks all your centers, right? Mind, body, spirit, gut, heart, head, go. Don't hesitate. Go. We have this Moon Jupiter conjunction today. There's plenty of available information over the course of the next 12 hours that if you need to make significant decisions, make them. Make them and don't look back, right? Just make them and don't look back. Sun Venus conjunction, if you have to negotiate, you can do that. You can negotiate through it, right? There's a square with Saturn, and that means that you have to take time to basically spell things out. This is why this is happening. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm making this move. And the other person has to hear it, and then you have to go through it, right? This is all part of this Venus-Saturn square, Sun-Saturn square. On a macro level, that's a much bigger issue. Much bigger issue, right? We look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. What sign is she? She's a Gemini. And right now, she's kind of leading the pack. Whatever you think of her, I watched a video of her last night. She was calling out the fucking Republican Party. This is not your typical, Republican and whatever kind of baggage she may have with Trump or Q or whatever. Like, she's somebody who's willing to at least stand out and shoot her mouth off. And she's pissed off. And I think right now, because she's a Gemini, she's a Vox Populi. I'll tell you this. When we were in 2016, Trump was the Vox Populi. He's a Gemini. He was the Vox Populi. That's why he became so popular. And that's why he was able to be theoretically elected, right? He is not the Vox Populi right now. It is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is the Vox Populi. She is the voice of the people. Trump is dealing with all these other, encumberments, right? And she's not running for president, but this is the person who is the Vox Populi. And she happens to be a Gemini. And it's squaring off against Saturn. And we're looking at Saturn as a system of control. Saturn in Pisces. It's the medical industry, right? That's what it is. Pisces, drugs, pills, injections. Saturn, doctors as high priests. Fauci, right? That's Saturn. Fauci's a Capricorn. So look at what we're doing right now. We're squaring off against this. So this is a very interesting week astrologically. I'm just telling you, though, you got to be on your toes. You got to be on, and I'll go even one step further. If you live in an urban environment, you better start paying attention and have situational awareness. That is the intensity of this Mars-Pluto square. Situational awareness. All right. Let's get into our star of the day. A very complex character. So complex, I have hardly enough time to go over his chart and sort of the effects of this guy in our lives. Before I do, please go to truehempscience.com and check out their CBD products. Somebody just ordered some of their topicals for some aches and pains that they have in their body. So if any topical you want to use, I would suggest, and by the way, check with your doctor, but I would suggest you use some DMSO, because DMSO is like a transport. It's like a transdermal transport. And so it gets into your skin, right? DMSO will get into your skin, and you come on top of that with some CBD, it goes deeper, right? So check out DMSO, make your own decisions, obviously. But go to truehempscience.com. They've got topicals, they've got edibles, they've got tinctures, they've got nano-emulsified, they've got alcohol-based, they've got water-based, they've got spagyrics, you name it, it's there. Anything that you need for your wellness concerning CBD, All you got to do is type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get a free goodie bag with your order of $100 or more. $150 or more, we get you free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. All right. Let's get into our star of the day. He's a much more complex character than we have time for, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right. Today's star of the day is John Maynard Keynes, who is probably the most influential person in the 20th century when it comes to economics. Keynesian economics was the ruler of the day up until Milton Friedman came along and kind of kicked him in the ass. And what is Keynesian economics, you may ask? Well, some of you may know. He was the first economist to come along and basically say that the economy as we know it, which is based on factors like supply and demand and available money in the system, he came along and said that that is not a tenable economic model, and that the more sustainable and tenable economic model was for the government to become involved in the money business. So Keynes comes up with macroeconomics. This is where we get the term macroeconomics from. It's from John Maynard Keynes. And he believes in his economic system and theory that it is the government's not only right, but its role to spend money in order to keep the economy stimulated. So when you see what's going on in our government today, what you're witnessing is basically what's called modern monetary theory, which is a mutation of Keynesian economics. So Keynes is the guy that comes in and basically says to Lloyd George of England, who was running the show at the time, look, if you're going to stimulate this economy after World War I, you're going to have to get involved in the business of money, right? You're going to have to literally start social programs. And so Keynes's contemporary of that time is ultimately will become Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who will take the Keynesian economic theory and apply it to a post-depression America and create big government. This is where it all starts. Right here, this guy. And you can see in this chart that it's a chart wired for money, right? Taurus on the midheaven. And then we can just get into all this shit right here. But the thing that I'm really looking at is the Saturn Pluto conjunction. Gee, where did we hear that? Where did we hear that before? At the beginning of this transmission, right? And I talked about the Saturn Pluto conjunction and how it was a metastasization of governments and corporations. And look who has a Saturn Pluto conjunction in their chart. John Maynard Keynes, right there. That's the model. He is the modern architect of big government, and big government ultimately becoming a corporation unto itself with a bunch of smaller corporations that feed into it, so that government has basically a blank check to spend money when needed to theoretically stimulate the economy. This is the guy. It's him. Right? And he changes economic theory forever. Forever. And he's also a Gemini, sun, moon, new moon, Mercury. So he's bright. He's a very bright guy. There's no disputing his intelligence, right? This guy was considered to be a towering intellect, and his ability to kind of have these macroeconomic models, which to that period of time did not really exist, right? Because you got to remember too, we are coming into statehood out of World War I, not us, right? We were already in, but Europe's coming into statehood. Before that, it was all monarchical. So he is developing the blueprint for the economic theory of statehood that's about to emerge post World War I. This is the guy right here. And you can see it with the Saturn Pluto conjunction right there, Gemini, big pivot, right? The big pivot. And he's a Leo rising. The guy, I got to tell you, the guy was a little fucking eccentric too, right? Like basically, he was fucking kinky. He was kinky, and you can see it with the square with Uranus, right? And Uranus in the second house. What's that? That's radical. That is radical theory when it comes to money and hard money. That's hard assets, the second house. And he's got Uranus and Virgo, right? So he's going to upturn the apple cart when it comes to all this. He's got True Node in Scorpio. Hey, no problem. Don't have the money? Well, we'll go borrow it from somebody else. We'll tap into other people's money. Here, get me Lord Rothschild on the phone. Let's set up a deal, right? This is the dude. He was also queer as a $3 bill. You know, one of the things that he everybody knew he was gay, right? But they had to protect him. And he was, he had a thing for the dancer Nijinsky. He loved Nijinsky's thighs, right? This is basically a quote, right? He's got Mars and Aries. You know, he's got Mars and Aries, 9th house. Where's Nijinsky from? He's from Russia. And the weird part about him is that, and again, it's the Gemini thing, right? Eventually, he winds up marrying this Russian woman, but they basically have kind of like this open relationship, Venus-Neptune conjunction, open relationship. And she can do anything she wants. She's got this reputation of being absolutely wild, right? She's wild. And he doesn't give a shit, right? He's got a companion. And in his mind, he's as wild and liberated as she is. So, you know, on the personal side, Keynes is, he's another one of these people who has a, what's the word I'm looking for? He has, I don't want to use a kink or perversion, but he has a side to him that is abnormal and disruptive and revolutionary, right? Like he's not going to take an approach that would be quote unquote more conservative, right? That's not what Keynes is about. And it's a theme that runs through his life, right? It's not just his policies, his monetary policies. This guy became like God. I'm telling you, up until Milton Friedman came around, this guy was like God. And to this day, he still has a massive stronghold over economic theory, which is now basically MMT, which is we're just going to print money. And it's like Keynes on steroids. Jupiter in Cancer. Cancer is actually pretty good with money, right? They're good with money. They're good with bookkeeping. They're good with accounting. And Jupiter is like, he's really good, right? In the 11th. The one thing I will say about Keynes in his favor, before I completely trash him, the one thing I'll say about him in his favor is that when they had the Treaty of Versailles, Keynes thought that the economic measures that the so-called victors of World War I were about to initiate and bring to the German people were far too punitive, right? He warned them about what they were doing and that they should not have they should not go down this path because it would have extremely negative repercussions for the German people and their economy. He was right. He was absolutely right. So to his credit, he at least saw far enough downstream so that he knew that it was going to be a tough road for those people to hoe. But some other assholes overrode him. And so he really did not have a very strong presence or influence during negotiations. One of the negotiations, like Germany, you lost. This is what you got to do now. Go suck a dick. Right? That's what happened. But You just tell, man, like 10th house, look at the influence here. Look at the influence. You want to see somebody, for better or worse, who is a titan, who changes the course of history. You're looking at a chart right there, and especially with that Saturn Pluto conjunction. All right, that's your THS star of the day, John Maynard Keynes. And with that, I wish you a very good day. We'll be at 15 minutes over on 15 minutes. There's a link in the chat box. We're also streaming on Rumble. So if you want to go to Rumble, it's there. I try to keep the chat in one place. But if you want to go to Rumble and chat, that's fine. I don't have any hard and fast rules. And there was some hookup and linkage problems with Rumble. I fixed those. So we should be going off like clockwork today. So please join us. We're going to be talking about the new quote unquote president of Mexico. And then we'll revisit that again on Friday with our good friend Russ Winter. And so it's a major deal. Mexico's new president. All right. Stay cool out there. Stay frosty. Have a great day. God bless you all. And we'll be back here tomorrow for another edition of the Astro Weather.